Hi, this is Dr. Bogner with Autism is Biomedical, joined by our CEO and President Alex Zaharakis and our special guest today, Brian Hooker. How are you guys?
Doing good. Thanks. Thanks, Christian and Alex. It's great to be with you.
Just a quick intro. Brian Hooker, Professor Hooker, has dedicated his career to advancing the health and well-being of children. Currently, he serves as the Senior Director of Science and Research at Children's Health Defense, an organization committed to safeguarding children's health in the US and worldwide. Alongside his work in advocacy, Dr. Hooker co-authored the New York Times best-selling book Vax-Unvaxxed, Let the Science Speak with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Before joining Children's Health Defense, Dr. Hooker was a professor of biology at Simpson University in Redding, California, where he specialized in microbiology and biotechnology. His academic journey began at California State Polytechnic University in Pomona, where he earned a Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering in 1985. He continued his studies at Washington State University, obtaining both a Master's of Science and a PhD in Biochemical Engineering. Dr. Hooker's contributions to science and engineering are notable. He's the co-inventor of 5 patents and has published over 70 papers in internationally recognized peer-reviewed journals. His groundbreaking work earned him the Federal Laboratory Consortium Recognition Award in 1999 for his project on reactive transport in 3D dimensions, as well as the Battelle Entrepreneurial Award in 2001. Beyond his academic and professional achievements, Dr. Hooker has been a vocal advocate for vaccine safety since 2001, a cause close to his heart as the father of a 25-year-old son with autism. In 2013 and 14, he collaborated with the CDC whistleblower Dr. William Thompson to expose corruption in vaccine safety research. This partnership led to the release of over 10,000 pages of internal CDC documents revealing significant flaws and misconduct in their studies. Through his scientific rigor and unwavering commitment, Dr. Hooker continues to champion efforts that prioritize truth and transparency in public health. Wow. Thank you, Brian, for your work. It's quite a mouthful here. Incredible. Thank you so much from me, and it's probably say from the entire autism community, for having people like you, exposing truth and working hard, for the one cause of getting our children's healthy again. So with that being said, we wanted to kind of pick your brains on a couple topics, and we might jump
Sure.
from one to the next because I know we have only so much time. You have a busy schedule. So, Alex, any questions that you wanted to ask Brian?
Yeah, no, so thank you so much. You have an amazing background and credentials, and you've done so much for the field. And obviously our organization, Autism is Biomedical. One of the components that we're really trying to put out there is that medical there's a medical underlying to autism. You know, for a parent that recently has a child that gets a diagnosis.
Right.
Typically, it's in the toddler range, between 1.5 and 3 years old. There's a lot of information being thrown at them at once, right? They're seeing their practitioners. They're potentially seeing an early intervention. They're being told that they need to do speech therapy. Um, it's a really difficult time. And what is some advice that you have to them so that they don't get kind of, sucked into a specific corner and not aware of all of the other components? Because isn't it true that in the Western medicine, the approach currently right now for autism, there is really no workup for the medical pieces
Right.
to,
There is no workup for, and there's no standard workup. And there's a lot of, within what I would consider the mainstream allopathic medical community, there's a lot of lying and hiding. And so, that's one of the reasons why I would recommend that you see a reputable integrative physician and that you work with organizations like Autism is Biomedical, because of that propensity for the mainstream medical community to censor, anything regarding a diagnosis of autism. It has a diagnosis code in the International Classification of Diseases, the ninth edition. It's autism 299.0, 299.1. It is a medical condition. And so it's incumbent that the first thing that you do is you get a really, really complete picture of what's going on medically with your wonderful special child. You need to know what's going on. I was fortunate, Christian and Alex, that I was recommended to see an integrative pediatrician when my son turned 2. We actually saw him on my son's second birthday. And it changed our lives. It absolutely changed our lives. It changed the trajectory. And so we were very fortunate. It's almost like we stumbled onto it. We weren't necessarily looking for an integrative pediatrician, but this was an individual that we knew treated autism, and we had no reason not to believe that autism was biomedical because we saw, from a medical standpoint, that after my son's vaccine injury, he fell apart biomedically.
Wow. Now, what kind of dysfunctions would you say, that you can measure? I mean, for you having your background in biochemistry and things like that, I mean, it must have been surprising because you probably never heard of any of this before, kind of going down this situation with your son.
Mhm.
What are the kind of dysfunctions that may show up on some of the testing, at least in your experience, what you've been exposed to? Deficiencies, maybe GI issues, or there are issues with folate, or there are issues with immune function. Because most of the parents, when they get this diagnosis, no one is saying anything about this stuff.
I really appreciate that. And again, I mean, I feel like you're doing God's work because people need to know what's going on. We knew because of my son's bowel, and because of the inconsistency in his bowel movements, that we knew that it was a gut issue. We knew right away. And so looking at, the entire gastrointestinal system, from swallowing to having a bowel movement and everything therein, everything in between, I think is so absolutely important. And then on top of that, realizing that a lot of these kids are toxin bioaccumulators. They do not detoxify well, period. And those were the two things that were the hallmarks of, my son's initial diagnosis. In addition to that, we were, when he was diagnosed in 1999 and 2000, there weren't genetic tests, there weren't genetic panels. But I think that a good genetic panel is extremely helpful in conjunction with like a differential diagnosis and all the other laboratory work on toxicity, on GI, and in just the normal parameters too. Anything that would, in terms of differential diagnoses of autoimmunity is so, so important. And, unfortunately, when you get this diagnosis, there's so much there. And not only do you need to get all of these diagnostic tools in play, but you also need guides. You need people that are going to be able to interpret that information. I had a leg up, but the whole time that everything was sort of flashing before my wife's eyes and my eyes, I kept on thinking about those people that don't have a background in biochemistry or in medicine, or that were just learning this themselves. And my heart went out to them. I wanted to be able to help. I wanted to be able to give my own expertise in this. But I do think that, having somebody that is an integrative practitioner that can communicate with you and interpret these results. And then having, sort of the checks and balances of this organization and other organizations that believe that autism is biomedical, is super, super important.
Now, you mentioned in 1999 you didn't have much at your fingertips in regards to genetics and all of that. Recently I sent you a video where we investigated, what are the pediatricians actually basing their recommendations from, and
Right, right.
to the conclusion that at least that was up to date. Many physicians use it where they take recommendations of what to do, but for autism, basically they were saying there's no evidence of any biochemical or metabolic abnormalities, and that was based on a study from 1996. And it hasn't changed. And now 30 years later, that's basically what you get. Oh, it's autism, go ABA, OT. How do you think we can change this paradigm? Where do we need to start with that? At the medical societies and medical schools, at the university level, the hospital? How are we going to change this, to introduce this type of new technology information that we have obtained over the last 30 years?
Well, I would like to see a lot of things happen. I would love to see, this information included in medical school curricula, because it is so vital. It's so absolutely important. I had the good fortune of working with a team, including Jeet Varia, Dr. Varia, and Martha Herbert, and we just produced a really important publication regarding the neuroimmunological aspects of autism. And, Dr. Varia, who did the lion's share of the work, I think he integrated almost 2,000 references into that particular review article. It's a preprint now, and it is under peer reviewed for, acceptance into a journal. But there's so many different facets, and it's all in the open, established medical literature. It's not, people that have this misconception that would, have the hubris to go back to a 1996 article and act like it's up to date. And it's shameless. It's absolutely shameless that they would do that. They need to do a deep dive in the literature. So I think we need to impact the medical profession in spades. And I think, with the recent developments in the government, I think we have more of an opportunity than ever to do that.
Brian, can you explain what a regression is, and typically what age is that observed? But have they happen outside of 2, 3, 4 years old? Because, many parents report having either a sudden onset regression or kind of a slow regression over a couple of months. How does that look for, the parents out there that may be kind of on the fence of, hey, I'm starting to see some symptoms pop up here?
Normally, developing infants do not lose skills. So, and I've heard so much gaslighting and shaming from the sort of the traditional allopathic medical community of, oh, well, parents, they're just the best indicators of coincidence. No, the parents are the best experts. And so if you see something that's concerning as a parent, then you need to follow up on that concerning development. And honestly, I've seen regression as young as 6 months, and I've seen regression as old as 5 years. And I know that there are individuals who have regressed into, autism and autism features even older than that. There was a case of an individual that, because of a court battle, ended up a 5-year-old ended up getting like 17 vaccines in a very, very, very short period of time. And that individual, spent 12 days in ICU after that happened. It's shameless. It was horrible. Should have not have happened. And then regressed into autism full blown, the whole characteristics, biomedical and sort of neuroadaptive regressed into autism. And so when you see loss of acquisition of skills that were previously had, my son had speech before he regressed into autism, then he had none. My son had eye contact and joint attention, and then he had none. Um, and it was profoundly obvious. His regression was associated with his vaccine injury. I think that a lot of times that's the case. It doesn't necessarily have to be the case. But from anecdotally from parents' experience, and then also from my research, I see, a strong statistically significant relationship, with vaccine uptake and autism incidence. So it's really, really hard to deny that. But I trust parents, and I think that parents need to trust themselves. You are the one spending all that time. And so if something, picks up your senses, if there's a loss of skill acquisition, then it needs to be addressed.
Yeah. So with that knowledge, that you just presented here, which is, I mean, pretty compelling, having probably 90+% of the parents and families affected with autism that I see in my practice mentioning that they believe that vaccines were part of their child's regression. Having that happen to my child, very similar as to
Right, right.
um, we are up against a very aggressive agenda, however. The agenda, the movement of the evolution of neurodiversity.
Yes.
And, I mean, just as an example, for what we're doing, Alex has received a death threat 2 weeks ago. There are people contacting us. I'm autistic. Autism should not be cured. And I kind of dug into this a little bit. But I want to pick your brain. One of the people that we have partnered up with is Patricia Lemer. She's been around in this community for almost 50 years, and she's wrote this incredible book, Outsmarting Autism. And in there, she writes that the origins of neurodiversity actually from the 1990s. Judy Singer, she
Right.
was an Australian sociologist. She coined it to describe conditions like autism as a natural cognitive variation rather than a disorder. And then they started to grow in the 2000s. They gained momentum through online communities and self-advocates, including Nick Walker, who emphasized acceptance and societal adaptation over treatment or cure. And then, became mainstream mostly in the 2010. NeuroTribes by Steve Cyberman in 2015 brought neurodiversity into the public eye, highlighting the contributions of neurodivergent individuals and calling for systemic change in workplaces and education. And then in the late 2010 years, the advocates have increasingly opposed interventions like ABA and research aimed at curing autism, focusing instead on acceptance and challenging stigmatizing narratives. And I know that J.B. Hadley, for his book on the end of the autism epidemic,
Yes.
he has received a lot of backlash to the point where people said he must hate his son, I've read. So, what are your thoughts on this movement of, autism pride, neurodiversity, it's normal, this aggressive movement? We're the complete opposite of that. What do you think about that?
I think it's really toxic. I think that at its core, it's very, very sociopathic in terms of these individuals, clinging to a diagnosis that has become a moniker. And, I'm very, very careful as an individual not to really identify with any particular characteristic or feature of my personality and then have that become my moniker. We're much more complex beings than that. Um, and because autism has been thrown around as a diagnosis so liberally, from individuals that are very, very high functioning, very, very literate, and do not need assistance or care. you know, to me, that's not really an autism diagnosis. It's very fanciful, and in some ways, it does ensure that the practitioner that gives you the diagnosis gets insurance reimbursement for giving you things like Risperdal. But it's to me, it's absolute rubbish. And I will tell you a story. I had a psychologist who diagnosed me and my wife both as autistic about 20 years ago. We were both diagnosed as being on the spectrum. And that was really, really insulting to me. Looking at what my son was going through every day, and also knowing that, yeah, I probably have some social issues or, social phobia or whatever, but call it what it is. Please don't call it autism. That's such a misnomer. And when you look at individuals that need 24/7 care, individuals that need help toileting, individuals that need assistance because literally they're trapped in their own bodies and their bodies will sort of defy them all the time, and see all of that suffering that this whole neurotribes and neurodiversity movement is trying to bury. To me, it is unconscionable that somebody would do that. And I see these grifters with these diagnoses that are high functioning, that have, traveled to areas like Washington, D.C. on their own, going through airports, navigating things like Uber all alone. And then I look at so they can testify and talk about how great neurodiversity is. And then at the same time, having to assist my son to get out of bed and have his daily routine every step of the way, helping him put on his socks and shoes because he doesn't have, he's so dyspraxic, he can't tie his shoes. It's so egregious. It does cause my blood to boil. Um, if they want their own moniker, they should probably come up with a different name, but it's not autism.
It's not fair to stand in the way of 30 to 40% of autism is in the severe category, at
Right.
least the way it's categorized. So these are kids that have problems, like you said, going to the bathroom, they're head banging, they eat one or two foods, they can't be in a room alone, they need constant supervision, they're self-injurious potentially, harming themselves, harming others.
Right.
To make a general claim and say that, hey, no one can help these children that are severe metabolically to improve, to get a better quality of life, such that they aren't harming themselves, such that they can start to toiletry and go to the bathroom. If we can support those biomedical things, that has happened for many people. To stand in the way of that,
Hmm.
over the message that, that these things shouldn't be supported or improved. I think that that's selfish. I think that's unfair. And the difficult thing is that they have the voice. They have the louder voice. And these kids that are suffering, with all of these medical components, the only people that can speak for them most often is their parents that
Their
see it on a
parents.
daily
Exactly.
basis.
Exactly. And, honestly, my son who has autism, who cannot speak, who spells to communicate, he doesn't really want to hang out with the neurotribes people. I mean, he's told me specifically is that, he identifies more with individuals who will embrace the fact that one of the first things that he ever said as a non-speaker when he was openly communicating was, what if you were a superhero? This is exactly what his therapist said. If you were a superhero, what would your superpower be? And he said, I want to speak. Okay. So, am I supposed to deny him that because he's special and he's autistic? It's a bunch of crap, so you even, and we're all dads, right? We're all dads. And Alex, forgive me, I should know more of your story. Does you have a wonderful special child too?
Yeah, he's 7 years old. He
That's
regressed around 18 months. Same kind of story as you.
We're
Um,
dads.
yeah.
We're dads. We want the best for our kids. And then when our kids communicate, they want to do things that are supposed to, be their sort of autistic characteristics and not to embrace, but to actually overcome.
And kind of to echo what you mentioned in regards to spelling in our previous conversations, and not doing spelling for my 19-year-old as
Right.
well, a year and a half now. That was eye-opening for me. I wouldn't have really believed it if I wouldn't have seen it, but he's math genius. It's incredible. And it's like, where did he learn this? We don't know. There's so much we don't understand yet, but they are in there. And he just started to open up, on the 26 letter board, and started communicate with us
Congratulations.
a sentence, last week, which is, every time that happens, I'm bawling. I'm like, oh my God, you are in
Yeah.
there despite your strange behavior, and that's what somebody said. You cannot judge intelligence by behavior. It's like, telling a blind person to read, right? And judging their intelligence based on that. But, Alex has dug up some things in regards to the spelling. I'm a big fan. I know you are, Brian. You've been doing this much longer than I have, and you have great success with Stephen. And I have, even on my website, the teacher for Phil, she started her own company with it, and then it's
Great.
just popping up, and the results and reports that we get is just incredible, including what you said, that the children are communicating that they want to speak. I heard that too often now. However, the spelling to communicate has apparently been debunked by the American Speech Language Hearing Association, the ASHA, and they have recently issued a strong warning against the use of spelling to communicate, and actually even went that far as saying that it could be harming your child. What are your thoughts on that?
Really?
Yeah.
My son's been openly communicating since February of 2024. I wouldn't trade it for the world. Are you kidding? I've even asked him about it. He's seen the movie Spellers, and so he knows what ASHA says about this. And he's like, oh, he's like, Dad, what do I say? I mean, this is all me. This is all me in here. I am the one that is speaking now. And, even, it is unlocked so much for him. His first open communication, I mean, when he was just communicating in small phrases, was, how do you feel about the opportunity to do spellers? And he spelled out such a gift. And I knew that that was all him. There's so many there's so many built-in mechanisms to silence these children, because you know what, when they speak, they're going to say things that the medical community doesn't, the allopathic traditional medical community doesn't want to hear. And so ASHA is complicit in that silencing of these children. Absolutely. Absolutely. And quite frankly, I hope ASHA goes out of business. I mean,
Well, then you
you
have another one pop up, Brian, like other article, National Council on Severe Autism, the NCSA. They
like,
have dissected spellers and call it propaganda, and saying should not be entertained unless there's rigorous science. Why are they so opposed to listening actually to the parents? Like you said, we see it, we are excited. The child is excited. They communicate. Why is there such a aggressive pushback? Why is there not acceptance? Oh, wow, this is amazing. We should, research it. Why do they say this is all propaganda? We need studies, and I'm sure even if the studies come out, there won't be like, oh, okay, you guys proven it. Then they find something else. That's why they
it's going to
discourage
hit their
that.
bottom line. it benefits their bottom line. If they can continue to peddle out wholesale piles of steaming crap, which they call therapy, then that is where their gravy train is. I'm sorry, everybody that has a non-speaking autistic kid, don't walk, run to the nearest reputable speller's practitioner. Okay. But these individuals that are trying to teach my son shapes on flashcards, when he can do integral and tensor calculus in his head. I'm sorry, I'm going with the spellers. And that's evidence-based. If you want to see evidence-based, come to our houses. You will see it. I do not have time for the scientific consensus to get off their butts and do whatever they're going to do. We have kids who are locked in there who desperately want out.
No, I know, one thing that kind of stuck since the 90s when autism started to explode, that kind of never left over the next 3 decades was the question of heavy metal toxicity, right? And that there was something in the vaccines. And even though we have great results, with our approach in addressing the microbiome,
Yes.
kind of ultimately stimulating the body to detoxify and calm the inflammation. I know you have been, it's kind of like almost like your life's work of chasing down on the truth. And it seems like you're getting very close to answers. Now, tell us about, if you can, briefly, I know we don't have much time, about the Thompson tapes, if you could. What was that? What information came out of this, and how is this going to change possibly in the new administration?
Well, I'm very excited about the new administration. I think that we have so many opportunities ahead of us. I think there's going to be a lot of opposition to that, and so it's important that we sort of sharpen our arguments and really know what we're doing. But honestly, we do we do know what we're doing. William Thompson, of course, was the CDC whistleblower who revealed to me in 2013 and 2014 that the CDC was covering up the relationship between autism and vaccines. Specifically, the only thing that CDC has ever looked at regarding vaccines is the MMR and the mercury containing preservative thimerosal that's still in the flu shot. Um, the the truth and the fraud was that CDC had compelling documentation and actually realized that both of those things cause autism, and both of those things have a strong statistically significant relationship to autism incidence. There was compelling evidence as early as November 1999 showing that children who received thimerosal in their first month of life were about 7 times more likely to get an autism diagnosis that didn't. And it wasn't rocket science, right? It was a neurotoxin. Mercury is a neurotoxin. Why is it in vaccines? And then similarly with the MMR vaccine, they knew as early as November 7th, 2001, that the MMR vaccine was associated with autism, primarily, most significantly in Black boys, but also in all children who were being diagnosed with some type of regressive phenotype and regressive autism. So they knew that all on November 7th. And so the CDC whistleblower had come forward, granted 13 years later, with this information. And we really did everything in our power to disseminate this information and get it on the public domain. I thank God for people like Andy Wakefield, Polly Tommy, and Del Bigtree, who published the movie Vax, from cover-up to catastrophe, that did, because of censorship, all of a sudden people wanted to see this movie that the powers that be, that the authorities were telling you that you shouldn't see. And, it's a movie with a warning label. And so, I was very, very thankful that word got out on that. But really, all the mainstream media did with that story was to try to quell it. And it needs to come back out again. It needs the CDC committed fraud, and they knew as early as the late 1990s and the early 2000s that vaccines cause autism.
No, it might
I
be.
have a Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry. I was gonna say I have a question that, I don't think it's touched on enough, and I'm sure that, it plays a role in the whole vaccine story. You, you buy a car, it's not uncommon to get a recall of an airbag, right? You go to the store, you buy some milk, you can get something that spoils, right? I mean, there's produce that's being recalled for contamination with E. coli.
Right,
There has been documented evidence, and even Dr. Fauci has said some of the biggest issues with vaccines are contaminants that get in there that they're not ideally supposed to be in there. Things like mycoplasma, you're growing these things. To
right.
think that everyone is getting the same vaccine, even though you make these things on an assembly line, you QA, one out of 1,000 of them. You can't QA
Right,
every single one of them.
right.
What kind of role does that play in it, particularly when you have this huge push to make more of them, make them cheaper, you manufacture them quicker?
Mhm.
Does quality control in itself, I mean, because who's testing it? I mean, let's say you do a study for the MMR shot and you find out that it's either safe or it's not. Well, how do you know that it's being produced consistently every year with the same level of safety? Is there some kind of due diligence happening there?
No, vaccines are made cheaply. And the perfect story is the story of the Merck whistleblower, Stephen Kraling and Joanne Blokowski, the two whistleblowers. And I'm hoping that more of their story will come out. But, part of it is in the movie Protocol 7 that was just released by Andy Wakefield. But the other part of the movie was the fact that the lot variability in terms of how much virus is added, MMR is a live virus vaccine. It varies wildly depending on the batch that you get and the shelf life of the batch that you get and where it is in the shelf life. The amount of mumps, measles, and rubella virus that's in there can vary by, upwards to 50-fold. If you get something that comes off directly out of the plant, it has 50 times more vaccine virus in the vaccine than if it sits there until its expiration date or until just before its expiration date. So, kids that get the MMR are being overdosed with virus. And this
Wow.
levels of overdosing, if you can take in process considerations, have never been tested for safety. They've never been tested for safety. If you look at the threshold, uh, in the mumps portion of the vaccine, mumps has been tested for safety up to 150,000 virus particles. Lot to lot variability can make that go up to 500,000 or 500,000 virus particles. That's never been tested. That whole interval between 100,000 and 500,000, that's threefold. And you're likely to get coming right out of the Merck, right out of the factory. You're likely to get some stuff that's stuffed so full of virus that it's never been tested for safety. And then they wonder why, oh, why did these MMR vaccines cause so many seizures? It's not rocket science, guys. It's never been tested for safety. Process variability is huge. You do not know what you're going to get when you get a vaccine.
How confident are you, Brian, that this is going to change?
I'm very confident. The thing that really drives my confidence is, the fact that I've had the honor to work with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., for the last 10 years. He's a man of integrity. He's a man of his word. And he's been on his knees praying for these kids and praying for the opportunity to do this for the last 19 years, since he was really alerted to the entire issue regarding autism and autism being biomedical. And then that part of that biomedical component many, many times, if not most of the time, being vaccines. And I'm just very, very confident in his abilities, the team that he's assembling around him, to make significant change. I think there's going to be warfare because big pharma is not going to put up with it. But in the end, I know who wins, and it's us.
Well, God bless you for this. We pray for your safety, of course. Yeah, any other questions you have, Alex, before we end this here?
No, I think I really appreciate the discussion, and I think there's some key points here that, don't really see the light of day. And thank you for all that you do, the contributions that you're going to make. And we need leaders, we need people to kind of voice these things out there. And then we need education too. We need the parents to know this information so that they can have that, make a decision, and not just have the biomed community just kind of talking behind the scenes. It's like, who can you talk to this about, right? It's kind of, these parents are living dual lives because they
Mhm.
know the things that they're saying or the things that they feel are taboo,
Right.
and that's not right.
Not at all. Not at all. And I can't thank you two enough for what you're doing with Autism as Biomedical because, we're parents. I really, really, all three of us were dads first. We are absolutely dads first. And never underestimate the power of what a parent will do for their kid. And that's what you're doing on a grand scale. So thank you so much for your work. I'm so honored to be able to play a part in that.
And God bless all of the families that have been patiently waiting. We will do everything in our power to work with them, continue to work with them and help them. So thank you, Brian, for that. As a quick reminder, Autism is Biomedical is a 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization. Our mission is to support families in need to undergo biomedical intervention with consultations, testing, therapies, and that's what we want to do. We want to sponsor those families. We also want to advance the understanding in autism through biomedical research. And so that is all coming. If you want to find out more, please visit our website at autismisbiomedical.com. I know, Brian, you're considering joining us. We're very excited about this. So watch out for those news. And yeah, with that being said, we anticipate and looking forward to all of the changes that are coming. It's like a dream for us, having waited for so long. And so thank you, Brian, for everything.
Thank you.
Take care.